Get this piece of trash out of my ceremony before the general arrives. The words sliced through the polished air of Fort Sill's main auditorium like a whip crack. Colonel Bradley Vance stood rigid in his dress blues, medals glinting under the crystal chandeliers, his jaw tight with controlled fury. The object of his contempt sat hunched in a metal folding chair near the back wall, a man whose weathered face told a story of streets and survival, whose clothes carried the musty scent of donated fabric and rain-soaked nights. Marcus Reeves didn't look up. His calloused fingers absently traced the faded patch sewn onto his torn jacket, a ranger tab so worn the embroidery had nearly vanished into the fabric. Only 3 words remained visible, stitched in his daughter's uneven child hand 17 years ago. Phantom 6. The smell of floor polish and expensive cologne hung heavy in the pre-ceremony reception. 40 officers in pristine uniforms mingled near the buffet tables, their conversations dropping to whispers as they turned to stare at the homeless man who somehow made it past security. "Sir, the Veteran Outreach Program." A young female social worker, Sarah Mitchell, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We were told all veterans could—" "This is a formal military ceremony, Ms. Mitchell, not a soup kitchen." Vance's voice rose sharply. Every head in the room turned. "Look at him. He reeks of whiskey and failure. This is an insult to every officer in this room." Marcus's hands finally stilled. His blue eyes, still sharp beneath the gray eyebrows and unkempt beard, lifted slowly to meet the colonel's gaze. For just a moment, something flickered there. Something cold and distant and infinitely patient. Then it was gone. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your age or experience, write "never give up" in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. "What's your name, soldier?" Vance took 3 deliberate steps forward, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. The question dripped with mockery. He knew full well this wasn't a soldier anymore, just a broken man who used to be one. "Marcus Reeves, sir." The voice was gravelly from years of exposure, but the words came automatic, muscle memory from decades past. "Reeves." Vance tasted the name like spoiled meat. "And what exactly made you think you belonged at a ceremony honoring real military heroes?" He turned to address the room, playing to his audience. "Gentlemen, ladies, feast your eyes on what happens when discipline fails, when a man doesn't have the strength to keep his life together." A few officers shifted uncomfortably. Most simply watched, their faces carefully neutral. The young lieutenants fresh from West Point exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but he said nothing. His right hand moved unconsciously to his jacket pocket, where a tattered photo remained hidden, a little girl with missing front teeth, holding up a ranger patch she'd decorated herself. "You know what I think?" Vance leaned down, close enough that Marcus could smell the mint on his breath. "I think you bought that patch at some thrift store. Real Rangers don't end up sleeping on sidewalks. Real Rangers have honor." "Colonel, that's enough." Master Sergeant Davis, a grizzled veteran with 28 years of service, stepped forward from the crowd. "The man's just sitting quietly." "The man is a disgrace, Sergeant." Vance straightened, his face flushing with anger at being challenged. "Call signs, medals, service. None of that matters if you can't even maintain basic human dignity. Look at him. Filthy clothes. Probably hasn't showered in a week. This is what failure looks like, Sergeant Davis. I will not have this embarrassment present when General Thornton arrives." Sarah, the social worker, tried again. "Sir, Mr. Reeves served in the Ranger Regiment. He has documentation." "Documentation?" Vance laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Let me guess. He told you some war stories? Claimed he was Special Forces?" "They all do, Ms. Mitchell. Every homeless drunk on every corner claims they were a Navy SEAL or Green Beret. It's pathetic." Marcus's breathing remained steady, but his knuckles whitened where his hands gripped his thighs. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the warmth from the crowd. A young lieutenant, fresh-faced and earnest, spoke up from the side. "Sir, maybe we could just let him stay in the back. It's a big room." "Lieutenant Morrison, are you questioning my judgment?" Vance whirled on the young officer. "This is my base, my ceremony. I've spent 6 months organizing this event to honor the Ranger Regiment's history. I will not let some street beggar who probably never served a day in his life taint this moment. I never said I was special, sir. Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a knife through water. Quiet, controlled, absolutely calm. Ms. Mitchell invited me as part of the outreach program. I didn't ask to come. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. He started to stand, his movements slow and deliberate, like a man whose joints ached from sleeping on concrete. Wait. Vance's hand shot up, stopping him. A cruel smile played at the corner of his mouth. Actually, I've changed my mind. Stay. I want General Thornton to see you. I want him to see the kind of people who claim to be veterans these days. The kind of people who wrap themselves in our flag while contributing nothing to society. The room had gone completely silent. Even the catering staff had frozen in place. You know what really disgusts me? Vance circled Marcus slowly, like a predator. Men like you make real veterans look bad. Every time someone sees a homeless man claiming to be military, it cheapens the sacrifice of those who actually served with honor. You're not just failing yourself. You're failing everyone who ever wore the uniform. Marcus sat back down slowly. His eyes fixed on a spot on the far wall, somewhere beyond the room, beyond the base, beyond Oklahoma entirely. His breathing remained steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. A technique he'd learned 30 years ago in Ranger School. A technique that kept him calm when mortar rounds fell close enough to shake your teeth. No response. Vance leaned in again. What? No war stories? No tales of heroism? Nothing? He straightened and addressed the room. This is why I maintain strict protocols, ladies and gentlemen. Let your guard down, let your standards slip, and this is what walks through your door. Weakness, failure, a cautionary tale. Master Sergeant Davis's jaw muscles worked furiously, but he held his tongue. Sarah Mitchell had tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands balled into fists. The young lieutenants stared at their shoes, and Marcus Reeves sat perfectly still, his thumb unconsciously rubbing the faded Phantom 6 patch on his jacket, his mind somewhere far away, somewhere cold and dark, where he'd once called in airstrikes with a whisper while 20 meters from enemy positions, where he'd carried wounded men through hostile territory for 3 days straight, where his call sign meant something that made hardened soldiers stand a little straighter. The sound of boots in the hallway made everyone turn. Heavy, measured steps approaching the auditorium doors. That's the general. Vance's face lit up with anticipation. He smoothed his uniform, checked his collar, and positioned himself to greet his distinguished visitor. Now you'll see what real leadership looks like, people. Watch and learn. The doors opened. General James Hammer Thornton entered through the side entrance, not the main doors. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd commanded thousands in combat, his 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, his silver star and Purple Heart ribbons forming a colorful bar above his left pocket. His eyes, steel gray and sharp, swept the room with practiced efficiency. They locked onto the commotion at the back. Colonel Vance, what's happening here? The general's voice carried authority that needed no volume. Vance spun, surprise flashing across his face before morphing into obsequious enthusiasm. General Thornton, sir, welcome to Fort Sill. I apologize for the disruption. We're just handling a small security issue. A vagrant who managed to slip past our... A veteran, sir. Sarah Mitchell's voice shook but held firm. A veteran from the Ranger Regiment. He was invited as part of our outreach program. Thornton's gaze shifted to Marcus, who had stood when the general entered, old habits dying hard despite 4 years on the streets. Marcus's posture was unconsciously military, shoulders back, chin level, hands at his sides. The stance of a man who'd stood at attention 10,000 times. Stand easy, soldier. Thornton approached slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. The faded jacket, the worn boots, the patch barely visible on the torn fabric. Something about the way the man held himself, even in rags, triggered recognition deep in the general's trained awareness. You served in the 75th? Yes, sir. 2 words. Simple. Direct. What's your name? The general stopped 3 feet away, his tone neutral, but his eyes intensely focused. Marcus hesitated for the first time, his gaze dropping briefly to his worn boots. Marcus Reeves, sir. Sir, with respect, this man is homeless. Vance stepped forward, injecting himself between them. He's been living on the streets. He's clearly unstable, probably fabricating his service record. I was just explaining to the staff that we can't simply... Colonel. Thornton's single word cut like a blade. I asked the man a question. I didn't ask for your commentary. He turned back to Marcus, his expression softening imperceptibly. Reeves. Marcus Reeves. He said the name slowly, searching his memory. When did you serve? 1989 to 2003, sir. Gulf War, Afghanistan, early operations. Specialty. Reconnaissance and direct action, sir. Deep penetration ops behind enemy lines. Thornton's eyes narrowed. His breathing had changed, faster, shallower. You operated in small teams? 4 to 6 men, sir. Sometimes solo for human collection. The general's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, fingers touching the edge of his Purple Heart ribbon. Around the room, conversations had died completely. 40 officers watched the exchange with growing confusion. Sir? Vance's voice rose with frustration. This is highly irregular. We have a ceremony planned, protocols to follow. We can't let every person who claims military service. Did you have a call sign, soldier? Thornton's voice was barely above a whisper now, but it carried to every corner of the room. His face had gone pale. Marcus's eyes closed. His jaw worked silently for a moment. When he opened his eyes again, they glistened with moisture that didn't fall. Yes, sir. Tell me. The room held its breath. Sarah Mitchell had both hands pressed to her mouth. Master Sergeant Davis stood frozen, his instincts screaming that something monumental was happening. Marcus swallowed hard. His voice, when it came, was barely audible, a ghost of sound that somehow filled the cavernous space. Phantom 6, sir. The effect was instantaneous. General Thornton's entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. His right hand, steady through 1,000 combat engagements, began to tremble. No! The word came out strangled. No, that's... General, clearly this man is... Vance started. Everyone shut up. Thornton's roar made half the room flinch. He never took his eyes off Marcus. Phantom 6. Phantom 6. His voice broke on the call sign. October 2002, Kandahar Province. Operation Python Strike. Marcus nodded once, slowly. A single tear escaped down his weathered cheek, cutting a track through weeks of grime. I was a first lieutenant, 23 years old, flying my 6th combat mission as a Black Hawk pilot. Thornton's voice shook. He was no longer seeing the room. He was seeing mountains, darkness, tracer fire cutting through the night. We took an RPG through the tail rotor, went down 12 miles behind enemy lines. Taliban everywhere. My crew chief died in the crash. My co-pilot had both legs broken. We had maybe 2 hours before they found us. The room had become a tomb. Not a single person moved. I radioed for help. Thornton's eyes glistened. Command said extraction wasn't possible. Too far. Too hot. Too many hostiles. They told us to evade and survive. 23 years old, General, I thought I was dead. He took a shaky breath. Then this voice came on the radio. Calm, cold, absolutely certain. Said 3 words. Phantom 6 inbound. Marcus's shoulders began to shake. He pressed his lips together, fighting for control. You came through 12 miles of enemy territory. On foot. In 6 hours. Thornton's voice rose. You killed 17 Taliban fighters. 17. Most with a knife so you wouldn't give away your position. You reached our crash site with 15 minutes to spare, carried my co-pilot on your back while I covered, and called in an airstrike that cleared our exfil route. Sir, Vance's voice was uncertain now, his face ashen. You saved my life. Thornton took another step forward, his composure cracking. You looked me in the eye, this nobody lieutenant, and you said, never leave a brother behind. That's the only rule that matters. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse. You apologized, sir. You said you were sorry for being a burden. You were 23 years old with 2 broken ribs, hypothermic, in shock, and you apologized to me. Because you risked your life. I was doing my job, sir. Nothing more. Your job. Thornton's voice cracked. Do you know how long command looked for you after that operation? Do you know how many missions I studied trying to understand how one man did the impossible? He turned to face the room, his eyes blazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to know what a real hero looks like? You're looking at him. Captain Marcus Reeves, call sign Phantom 6, 3 silver stars, 2 purple hearts, 47 successful deep reconnaissance operations. 0 casualties in his units across 14 years of service. The silence shattered. Master Sergeant Davis audibly gasped. Several lieutenants took involuntary steps backward. 2 senior officers who'd served in Afghanistan put their hands to their mouths. The Phantom 6? A colonel near the front spoke, his voice filled with awe. The legend? The operator who pulled out those CIA contractors from Helmand? Who coordinated the Tora Bora infiltrations? The same. Thornton's hands had formed fists. And you know why none of you recognize him? Because operators at that level don't get public recognition. No newspapers, no awards ceremonies, just classified after-action reports that most of you will never have clearance to read. Vance had gone absolutely white. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His carefully constructed authority crumbled like sand. Sir, I didn't know. He looked like what, Colonel? Thornton rounded on him with barely controlled fury. Like a human being who's fallen on hard times. Like a warrior who's been broken by demons you couldn't possibly comprehend. You think every combat veteran gets to retire to a nice house with a pension and no nightmares. No, sir, You just what? You just humiliated a man who sacrificed more for this country in a single operation than you'll contribute in your entire career? Thornton moved closer to Vance, his voice dropping to something far more dangerous than a shout. Let me tell you something about Captain Reeves. While you were getting your degree at some comfortable university, he was breathing through a buried tube for 18 hours while enemy forces walked over his hide site. While you were networking at officer clubs, he was calling in danger close fire missions with his radio operator dead beside him. While you were polishing your resume, he was carrying wounded men through hostile mountains for 3 days straight on a shattered ankle because never leave a brother behind. Vance stumbled backward, his face a mask of horror. Sir, I apologize. You didn't ask. Thornton cut him off. You saw a man in difficult circumstances and assumed worthlessness. You violated the first principle of leadership. Know your people. Honor your people. Protect your people. He paused, his next words coming out like hammer blows. You are relieved of command, effective immediately. Report to my staff car. You and I are going to have a very long conversation with the Inspector General about your fitness to wear this uniform. Sir, please. Vance's voice broke. Get out. Thornton pointed to the door. And pray that I don't dig deeper into how you've been running this base. Because if I find out you've treated other veterans with this level of contempt, ending your career will be the least of your concerns. 2 MPs appeared at Vance's elbows. He looked around desperately, but found only cold stares and turned backs. His carefully constructed world imploded in seconds. As they escorted him out, his shoulders were hunched, his pristine uniform suddenly looking ridiculous on his diminished frame. The door closed behind him with a hollow thump. Thornton turned back to Marcus, who stood perfectly still, his face wet with tears he no longer tried to hide. The general's own eyes glistened. Captain Reeves. The words came out thick with emotion. May I ask, how did this happen? How did Phantom 6 end up? Marcus took a shaky breath. My wife and daughter, sir. Car accident in 2019. Drunk driver. I was in Afghanistan on my last deployment. By the time I got home, his voice failed. I couldn't stay in the house. Couldn't sleep without seeing them. The nightmares from combat got worse. Started drinking to sleep. Lost the house. Lost my job. Just lost, sir. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah Mitchell sobbed openly. Several officers wiped their eyes. The VA? Thornton's voice was gentle. Tried, sir. The wait lists, the paperwork. I couldn't hold it together long enough to navigate the system. Easier to just disappear. Marcus looked down at his worn boots. Figured the world didn't need another broken soldier taking up space. No. Thornton stepped forward and did something that made every officer in the room straighten in shock. He embraced Marcus Reeves, 4-star general hugging a homeless veteran. Protocol be damned. The world needs every brother who's bled for it, and we failed you. I failed you. Sir, listen to me. Thornton pulled back, hands on Marcus's shoulders. You don't owe me anything, but I owe you everything, and I'm going to make sure you get everything you deserve. He turned to address the room, his voice ringing with command authority. Ladies and gentlemen, this ceremony was supposed to honor the Ranger Regiment's legacy. Instead, we're going to honor the man who embodies that legacy better than any of us ever could. He snapped to attention and brought his hand up in a crisp, perfect salute. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Master Sergeant Davis saluted. Then the senior colonels. Then every officer in the room rose to attention, 40 hands snapping up in unison, holding the salute for a homeless man in torn clothes and a faded patch. Marcus's body shook. His hand, trembling, weathered, scarred, slowly rose to return the salute. His fingers touched his forehead with muscle memory that 20 years on the streets couldn't erase. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of all his ghosts. Rangers lead the way, sir. Rangers lead the way, Captain. The moment held. Stretched. Crystallized into something that would be talked about on this base for decades. Then Thornton lowered his salute, and the room exhaled. Captain Reeves, as of right now, you are under my personal command. I'm assigning you a full-time advocate to navigate the VA system. You'll be housed in the officers' quarters on this base while we process your benefits and get you into the best PTSD treatment program in the country. You'll receive full back pay for all years of service and disability compensation. And, he paused, his voice softening, I'd like to offer you a position as a training consultant for our special operations candidates. No Ranger should learn tactics from anyone but the best. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Sir, I can't. You can, and you will, because that's an order, Captain. Thornton smiled through his tears. Unless you're refusing a direct order from a general officer? The ghost of a smile, the first in years, touched Marcus's weathered face. No, sir. The room erupted in applause. Not polite golf claps, but genuine thunderous applause. The young lieutenants rushed forward. Sarah Mitchell threw her arms around Marcus, sobbing. Master Sergeant Davis clasped his hand with both of his own, words failing him entirely. General Thornton stepped back, watching the scene with satisfaction. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to his aide. Cancel today's ceremony. Reschedule for next month, and I want full press coverage. The story of Phantom 6 needs to be told. He looked up at Marcus, now surrounded by officers eager to shake his hand, to hear his story, to simply be in the presence of a living legend. The man who had saved his life 23 years ago. The man he'd tried to find through official channels dozens of times. The man who had been hiding in plain sight, invisible in the greatest pain of all. An hour later, as Marcus sat in a comfortable chair in the base commander's office, clean clothes laid out for him, a hot meal on its way, and a doctor scheduled to see him, he pulled the worn patch from his jacket pocket. Phantom 6, hand-stitched by his daughter's 8-year-old fingers. I kept my promise, baby girl, he whispered to the empty room. Rangers never leave anyone behind, not even themselves. Outside, word had spread through the base like wildfire. By evening, it would reach social media. By morning, every news outlet in the country would be running the story. Homeless veteran revealed as legendary special operations hero. The photo, General Thornton embracing Marcus in that auditorium, would become iconic. But in that quiet moment, alone with his memories and his ghosts, Marcus Reeves simply closed his eyes and allowed himself something he hadn't permitted in 4 years. Hope. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in a different auditorium. This one was packed with over 500 people. Active duty Rangers, retired veterans, families, press, and military leadership from across the country. He wore a new uniform, not active duty, but the formal dress reserved for honored consultants. His beard was trimmed, his eyes clear. The tremor in his hands had lessened with medication and therapy. General Thornton presented him with a plaque. in recognition of extraordinary service and enduring sacrifice. Phantom 6, the legend who saved more lives than we can count, who embodied the Ranger creed in darkness and silence, and who proved that a hero's worth is not measured by circumstance, but by character. When Marcus stepped to the microphone, the room fell silent. I don't have much to say. His voice carried strong and clear now. Except this, I spent 4 years thinking I was worthless. Thinking the world didn't need another broken soldier. I was wrong. He paused, gathering strength. If you're struggling, if you're lost, if you think nobody cares, you're wrong too. There are people who will fight for you the way you fought for them. You just have to let them find you. He looked directly at the camera broadcasting the event. To every veteran out there who feels forgotten, you matter. Your service matters. Your life matters. Reach out. Let us bring you home. The applause was deafening. As Marcus left the stage, a young lieutenant, fresh from Ranger School, approached nervously. Sir, I just wanted to say, you're the reason I joined. I read your declassified operations in my tactics course. You're a legend. Marcus shook his hand firmly. No, soldier. I'm just a man who had brothers who wouldn't let me stay lost. That's the only thing that makes anyone a legend, the people who refuse to give up on them. Outside, Fort Sill's flag snapped in the Oklahoma wind. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle played, and Marcus Reeves, call sign Phantom 6, walked into the sunset with his head held high, finally home after the longest mission of his life. The photo of his reunion with General Thornton would be viewed 50 million times in the first week. But more importantly, it would prompt 12,000 veterans to reach out for help. 300 would cite Marcus's story as the reason they didn't give up. Sometimes the greatest mission isn't behind enemy lines. Sometimes it's finding the courage to come home. What did you think of Phantom 6's story? Did Captain Reeves get the respect he deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that honor our forgotten heroes. These warriors need us as much as we need them, and every share might save a life.